Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. One size doesn't fit all. Finding the right sized ERP for your business. For today's discussion, I have with me Sean Windle, founder and managing principal of ERP Advisors Group, and Ralph Hess, executive vice president at Navigator Business Solutions. Both bring decades of experience helping executives at companies, large and small, navigate the sometimes complex process of identifying the right fit ERP. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Sean.
Oh, good to see you guys. Thanks for getting together. This will be a fun discussion.
Yeah, we've got a lot to share.
Let's kick things off with you, Ralph. Why doesn't one size fit all work when it comes to ERP?
Well, everybody loves talking about ERP, don't they, Sean?
Oh, very
If you take a
exciting
look at
topic for
it,
many.
no business is the same, right? Each business is either at a different part in their journey or life cycle. You have large companies that are mature and need one set of capabilities. You have smaller companies that are very nimble and startup and accelerating very quickly. They have another set of capabilities. And then you have the cadre in the middle, which are somewhere in between that, right? They have some growth, they have some strategy, they have some aspirations. So really helping people find the right size is really important. I think that when you talk about the size, it isn't really the size of the solution that you're buying, but rather the size of the solution you're going to deploy. So there may be some that people maybe, let's say, overbuying. They're overbuying into some capabilities that are included that just aren't needed in their business. Then there's other people that aren't buying enough, right? They'll start very small and really not take into account what their growth aspirations or the corporate strategy is. And so they end up having to retrofit or use add-ons that aren't well integrated or aren't best of class for what they're actually trying to accomplish. Then you have this whole new area of headless ERP, which is a really unique kind of ERP as a backend that you can bring other front ends into. And so as people are looking to find that right size, they have to calibrate where they are as a company, where they want to go, really what their pain points are, and what their outcomes are looking to be. There is an ERP out there for you. Don't despair. But I do think you want to make your search focus on the right size, at least the right kind of level, which Sean is going to go into in just a little bit, the different tiers of ERP. But I think you want to make sure that as you're looking at it, it's not a technology buy, it's a business buy. And that business buy has to be aligned with the strategy. And so sizing according to your strategy is what you need to be doing.
Sean, now are you seeing the same thing when you talk to your clients and they're coming to you, whatever size they are, and do they have preconceived notions of what they want and you're guiding them through it, or are they coming to you and saying, I have no idea where to start?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we see a little bit of both. Honestly, I mean, I'll talk a little bit like Ralph said about some of these tiers, but I think when people are approaching ERP, right, it is such a nebulous topic, which is why I'm grateful for you guys that we can have this discussion today to just get some truth out there about what ERP is and like how do you use it and how are you successful with it ultimately. I mean, people are betting a lot, including their jobs sometimes on these big projects. But sometimes folks come in and they worked in other organizations that implemented an application, an ERP, and let's say those organizations were big, like gargantuan, right? Now they've changed and maybe they're at smaller organizations. And so they think, oh, we can just put in an ERP, we'll put in whatever that was, right? Which can sometimes be a disaster, or vice versa, where we've been running an application, this small application forever. It's fine. There's no problem. So I'm not going to change it, even though we've grown from, 20 million to 200 million in revenue. So there's, the size in ERP, it really comes into play a lot. And so some people can come to us and say, we've been on QuickBooks and we're this size. I'm like, wow, like, congratulations. I can't believe you're that big and you're using QuickBooks. Or we have people that are coming to us and, especially with your all's background, I'm curious for you to dive into this a little bit too, that, oh, I used SAP at this large organization before. And now the situation's a little bit different. And you guys offer a couple options there too, which I think is exciting. We'll talk about that. But I think generally a way when you're looking and you're in the shoes of the potential ERP, right? You're the purchaser, you're starting the valuation, you're starting to think about this. There's 4 tiers that will help you to sort of slice up the market so that when you're out there, like who you're talking to and which tier they kind of fit into, right? So like a tier 4 will start kind of at the bottom. We call it a tier 4. And these are like entry level accounting solutions, right? They're good, right? This is where you see like QuickBooks and basically you just need to start building the business and start running it, get some good financials, sort of based on things like generally accepted accounting principles, not much international financial reporting standards in there. I don't think QuickBooks has IFRS.
No,
If the
sure
people
doesn't.
the people from Intuit will tell us when they hear this if they do. Please, always, as we always
Yes.
very willing to be corrected. But basically have these kind of entry level accounting systems that they can scale for sure. But what usually happens is you get into tier 3 where you start to see a little bit more of the ERP products. And this is where we're beyond just automating debits and credits and basic spreadsheets, where we've got functionality maybe in a couple areas of the business, maybe a nonprofit that we want to bring it together and sort of have one view of these areas of the organization, but maybe not a lot of transactions, not a lot of technical requirements, et cetera. So then we go up into more like tier 2 solutions. And we love to kind of play in the tier 2 space. And this is organizations, companies, nonprofits, even some public companies, right, that are in this 10 million in revenue up to maybe $1 billion. It's a big, 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 big market. There's really hundreds of thousands, probably millions of businesses and nonprofits, et cetera, some government, that's in this range. And what they're looking for again is, sort of the accounting for sure, and it's the rest of the manufacturing or distribution or
Right.
it's a city or state or different kinds of government that has some other kind of function to it, right? You get into some of the other ERPs out there that aren't even really for like normal business. They do just government stuff, but they really need more access to data across the entire enterprise. And that's what enterprise resource planning is based off of, the whole enterprise, the resources within it, not just financials, but your people and inventory and assets. Man, I could go on, your leads, right? All that in one place. And then ultimately we have the larger tier 1 solutions, which are for more sort of organizations operating definitely more globally, multi entity, tons of products and services and a volume of transactions that need to get automated. So, I mean, Sean, that's sort of how we kind of break out the market. But I mean, if you're willing, Ralph, I would love for you guys to talk a little bit about kind of how you see this, right? Because you guys are interesting in that you sort of play on these different scales. I know you focus in one, but what do you think?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Sean. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you're starting to see the line blur between tier 3 and tier 2 and tier 1, right? Where the solutions are coming forward with capabilities that were previously only accessible in the tier 1 solutions, right? I mean everybody are really bringing forward a lot of capability and across multiple lines of business, whether it be planning and production, whether it be human capital management, whether it be distribution planning. A lot of those concepts, which really would have only been understood by the tier 1 solutions, are now becoming more widely available in the tier 2 solutions as well. So as you take a look at it, I think one of the primary things that we look at that you mentioned, which is very appropriate, is the volume of transactions and the complexity of the organization. So as you have a global footprint, as you have the multi entity, that's where oftentimes that tier one solution, whether it be Oracle, whether it be SAP, whether it be, any of the others, that has that already built in. Now, as you're looking at SAP strategy, which is what you're referring to, right? They're coming down into that tier two market with a lot of those capabilities of being able to support those types of companies up to $1 billion with their public cloud solution. But they also have one that kind of competes more nearly with just the tier two solution, which has, again, the ability to span the enterprise resource planning, right? And help a company have a singular view of their entire performance of the enterprise. So I think that tier one and tier two is getting muddier than the other two currently exist, right? You clearly know when it's got to be a tier two solution now, whereas before it was like, I don't know, is this a tier three with maybe a couple add-ons? No, people are now have the experience. The other thing to note is that nobody's buying their first ERP today.
Mm,
Nobody, right?
good
So
point.
this is their third, fourth, fifth system. If it's your second, that's great. Nothing against those people. So people already have an understanding of what the solution should do and what they should do for a company. And so, again, the right tier, the right fit, looking at the right solutions, those all kind of come together from both of our talking points.
Yep.
So you both mentioned something that I want to call out is it's not necessarily just the size of the organization, but the complexity of the organization itself or the complexity of their process that is a real determining factor when they're looking at an ERP.
Mhm. Yeah, there's no
Yeah,
doubt.
that's very true.
If
That
you think
that in
about,
volume, yeah,
yeah,
volume I think starts to drive some things, right? If you're driving millions of transactions a month, oftentimes, and I'm going to talk about the whole concept of private cloud versus public cloud and all that in another section. But really, as you get to the higher volume, that starts to drive some of your decisions on a solution as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's important that, for the people that are listening to this, that you really understand your requirements, right? So that if there are, millions of transactions that, that may come from not, what you would think, right? We have some clients that have gargantuan SKUs. Their parts lists, right, are
Right.
mammoth, and they have variations. And you look at the fashion industry, fashion apparel industry. There's lots of different kinds of requirements that come in on product types, and so it's a really good point that understanding transaction volume, understanding the size and magnitude of the solution before you even start having conversations with vendors kind of helps you to tuck in on which tier that you can focus in, so that your conversation isn't like, yeah, we're like all in and we're going to do this solution, and the vendor's like, yeah, I don't think you can afford us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
We do have one vendor that does that often to us. But we work through it, right? But
Yeah.
I won't say who that is. But you don't want to waste your time talking to a vendor that offers something that's just too big for you, right? So I think it's a great point.
You also, and Sean, you mentioned, yet they focus on where they are and some of the guidance that both our organizations work with them while we do this discovery process and understand their business is where they want to be. What is their strategic plan for growth? Are they going to stay the same and grow at 1% a year and just plod along? That's a whole different discussion versus a company that might be $10 million in revenue today, but is looking for that hockey stick growth to be 150 million in 2 years. And that becomes a very detailed conversation with the whole executive team at that company on what to focus on and when to focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can make the decision completely go in a different direction than you think it would have when you really dig in, and private equity backed organizations, or we have private organizations that are family owned that end up buying or sort of tucking in lots of different kinds of businesses, and their strategy is not just we're going to grow top line. It's growth in different markets. It's being able to go into international markets and have setting up a Brazilian entity isn't easy, right? There's a lot of requirements that are crazy. Sometimes you go into different countries. No offense, those other countries, they seem really hard.
Yeah. Right.
So
I think you and I both have a couple battle scars from those, Sean.
That's right. Oh gosh. Yeah, and so so you go and, oh well, this is where we are today, and this is what we need. But going forward into the future, we've been doing manufacturing forever, and that's the way it's going to be. And then you start talking to a couple people, to your point, Sean, they're like, well, our customers are starting to demand that we're really going on site and that we're working on the machines that we're building. And I think everybody's kind of been through these processes. It's not like I'm saying something that's new, but all of a sudden now we're not really a manufacturer. We're really more of a field services organization, and we're that, right? And we're doing professional services, or we're a pro serve firm that now is really specializing in selling appliances, right? And now we're a software company. Like, you see this variation on transactions, not just quantities and volume, but on types. And so, having an app that you can grow into is super, super important, because you don't and I think it's something you guys would agree with too. We don't want our clients to go into a new app next year and then have to do it 2 or 3 years later, unless something
Absolutely.
miraculous happened. Hallelujah, we'll take that. But something we knew about today or had an inkling to on what would happen in the future, we got to build that into the whole requirement set. So definitely key points.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Sean. Today's ERP decision is a 10, 15, 20-year decision. It's no longer when you and I were coming up in the business, everybody was changing every 3 to 5 years, and that was acceptable. That was the norm. Today, the decisions are being made, and they do not want to have to make that decision again. So really aligning with the strategy of the company, understanding what their growth plan is, understanding how nimble they want to be, what their appetite is for being, exploratory in terms of how they grow their business. Those are, you're right, absolutely have to be taken into account.
So bringing all of those considerations and size and complexity and industry, it could be retail, it could be industrial products, it could be ProServe. Ralph, could you jump in a little bit and explain at a high level some of the differences between on-prem systems and hosted systems and private cloud systems and public cloud systems? People start to hear all these terms thrown around, and some are legacy coming from years ago, some are brand new. Could you give us sort of a framework to talk about and for a little guidance for our listeners?
Absolutely, Sean. Happy to do that. And if you folks out there were really enamored with how many different options you have with ERP, you're going to just love the options you have with technology. So Sean mentioned some real buzzwords around there, and we're just going to try to distill a few of those. And we'll start with on-prem. It stands for on-premise. That means that the software is loaded locally in your building on your own set of hardware. And there are companies where this really is a requirement, whether it be from we've had companies in the Midwest, quite frankly, that weren't close enough to secure Wi-Fi or internet, where the ownership understood that in order for business continuity, they had to have an on-premise system. Sean and I were speaking earlier about, well, that's, people talk about that and the AS400 and this and that back in the day. But it is a very real possibility for today's technology as well. Now, most of your solution vendors or publishers really aren't encouraging on-prem anymore, but there is still the ability to get some solutions on-prem if that's what fits your business and your requirements. 2 key points that we talked about earlier. Hosted and private cloud, you can almost equate those to be the same. So cloud is a fancier way of saying that I am hosting my systems, and this may be that I have on-prem software, which I am now moving my servers into a place like Rackspace, etc., and having them hosted. That means that you're really moving the responsibility for your operations of the server and your network, etc., to an outsourced solution provider, which oftentimes makes more sense. They can oftentimes provide higher levels of security, cybersecurity, and all of those disaster recovery and all those things that you need to be concerned about. And that is when people, we used to call it hosted, can still be called hosted. Oftentimes now that set of software or applications up in the cloud are called a private cloud or hosted. Then you have what we refer to as public cloud, multi-tenant, multi-company solutions. That means that, again, you're hosting in a data center, whether that be AWS or Google Cloud, or even SAP has its own, Azure. You're hosting your applications, but they're not your applications. They are the software publisher's applications, which you are using the same set of code over different, what they call tenants. And so again, all of the responsibility for what I call DevOps, disaster recovery, operations, cybersecurity, all of those are being passed on to that provider. And what you're doing is really, in that case, oftentimes the benefit of that is you're staying the most current on the most current releases of code that the software publisher will produce. As I look back to the hosted or private cloud, that's where you're more in control of the software releases and when you want to apply them. So a couple different concepts, I'm mixing them in as we're going there. Now, as you take a look at what fits for whom, right? As we take a look at, I gave the example of where on-prem is still a good idea for certain companies that have that specific requirement. As we look at the private cloud, that is oftentimes for companies who want to maintain more control over their applications, meaning that they want to do more customizations, they want to control the cadence of the releases as they get applied. They basically just want to maintain more control over their application environment. And so that's where private or the private cloud environment is most useful. Also, there's the opportunity to tune performance in a lot more discrete ways. So as we talked about some of those companies that have the higher transaction volumes, et cetera, they may want to have more control over their servers, be able to work with their provider either to turn up or turn down the performance or scale their servers in a very distinct way for their business. With public cloud, you don't have quite that level of control. You do have the software publisher publishing releases, your ability to be able to test them and then apply them. However frequently that is, sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's twice a year, sometimes it's annually. And in that case, you're also using more pooled resources in terms of the hardware. You do have the ability with the proper architecture to have dynamic scaling for performance. But again, as you look at the types of businesses, you have your distributors, manufacturers, those can go very nicely on a public cloud solution. Sean mentioned, nonprofits, those types of companies, those can run very nicely in the public cloud. As you look towards the private cloud, those are typically your more regulated industries. So that may be, life sciences, pharma, utilities, etc. And again, lots of times it's regulatory rigor as to why they want to be able to control the software applications much more easily.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I blabbered on there for a bit, but hopefully that brought a little bit of distinction between them.
Yeah, I think I would add to that too. This, I'm going to even go back a little bit farther kind of in the history of sort of computing, that you have to remember that the computing and computers themselves, I sound like I'm in the 1950s here, but they offer massive massive, mammoth amount of processing capability that we didn't used to have not that long ago in our history, honestly, as a society. And so when you look at cloud solutions versus on-prem, on-prem, you have your own machine and you've got to maintain and all that kind of stuff. We all know about that, right? But when you're looking at cloud computing, of course, we can't not talk about AI too. But the amount of massive capability that the software vendors have at their fingertips now for how they can write their apps and the amount of processing that can happen is just it's like next level. That's what enabled AI. Where we've always had intelligent software. Software by itself is intelligence. It's somebody took the time to code, for a machine to make decisions. The machine doesn't make decisions. It's somebody told it what to do, right?
Right.
Well, now with all this computing in the cloud, now a lot of people can tell it what to do, and so much so they can tell it how to do things and how to learn on its own, and then it can just keep working and working and working and working while we're like sleeping and eating and other things. The computing just continues to go on and on and on and on and on. So, and that's only going to be more important, I think, for organizations. I mean, we have companies that call us that are 5 million in revenue, and they say, "Hey, we're going to switch, but we got to make sure that we get the right AI strategy with our vendor, with our software vendor." Like, you better believe you do. Like, it is important for sure. So, you layer that in, and what do you think, Ralph? As as you're talking to companies about sort of the real AI hype, but also like practical solutions. Like what are you seeing and talking to people about around that?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think that AI is really important today as people are evaluating systems, and not really for what AI is today, right? Everybody has this impression of determinative processing and Microsoft Copilot, and I can ask it anything, and it returns all kinds of different answers. But as you look at the foundation of AI, which is really machine learning, robotic process automation, analytics, that type of kind of what the bedrock is, many of the solutions already have that in it, right? And even such things as invoice scanning, moving from OCR to more of an AI-based invoice scanning for accounts payable, which is what everybody wants, right? Those things can be considered AI within a solution. Now you take the next level of what the publishers are hyping, and I will use the word hype, right,
Mm-hmm.
for what AI can do in terms of, hey, we're going to automate this person's job, be able to free them up to do just pure analytical type work, and then eventually the machine will do that too, and they'll go away. I mean, I do believe we're in the hype cycle there. I've tested a couple of different tools on a couple different publishers, and they're just not there. One of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons they're not there is they are very data dependent and data hungry, and the quality of that data is what's really required. So, a company's AI strategy, I always say it's great to have an AI strategy, but your application transaction layer has to be rock solid, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be capturing the maximum amount of data in the most accurate way in order for AI to start to learn your patterns, in order to be able to help you and make suggestions. So, the AI is, as we look at it with our customers today, is how can it help make you more efficient? How can it help you make more informed decisions? And then once you have all of that in place, then you can start using, generative AI to start help you make decisions. But that's my opinion, and the publishers can correct me if I'm wrong. It's still a couple years away before people are really going to say, yeah, this is it, boy. I was able to take this and it move this whole report into a pivot table. I was able then to feed it into another AI model and this, that, and the other thing. So I think it's there, it's coming. There's no doubt it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the fuel for it is data. It's compute and data. And
Yeah.
the compute is there. The data has to be there in order to really derive the benefit.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's really the basis of what ERP has been about since its beginning is how do we pull this, again, enterprise resource planning. But I would say that I do think from lots of these discussions, again, I appreciate being able to chat with you guys, right? But we talked to a lot of different people throughout the industry. And when a concept like cloud, I remember I had a client 20, that's not true, maybe 17 years ago, small nonprofit, tiny company come to me, an organization, and say, look, I don't know about this cloud thing, and I'm not really sure about it, and I'm not really sure I want to change. But I'm not sure I can't do that. Like, I think I have to do it because I can't maintain my hardware anymore on my own because of security issues, even back then, right?
Right.
I was like, whoa, things are changing now. Like, I know when that guy said that to me, I was like, okay, cloud's happening, right? So you sort of like the way that I think we work as a species, if you will, we won't get all into the sociological, sciences of man, although I love that stuff. But when you hear the hype, it's the people who are making these big billion-trillion-dollar investments. They've made them and they're continuing to make them. And when they make those investments, they're going to win. I
Oh,
saw
yeah.
this with telephony in the late 90s when I was a consultant, watching and working with all these telecom companies, and like, why are we putting all this fiber in the ground? I don't understand why it's so important. Right now we're on the
Right.
Zoom all
Yeah.
over the world and people are jumping in. But that we laid the groundwork for this 20 years ago for what we're able to do now from our homes, thankfully. I mean, if we hadn't had that during COVID, I don't know what would have happened to the economy. It would have been,
Then there would have been a real Titanic collapse, really.
it was
Mhm.
already just incredible, the effect, but it could have been even catastrophic, to your point. So now we're laying in the computing. Now we're laying in the software, the agents. We're getting into this agentic world. We'll see. You can't not think about Mr. Smith from,
Yeah.
that's the best agent out there.
Exactly.
Be careful.
Exactly. Yeah.
But, from enterprise software perspective, like, I'm excited. Again, we talked to a lot of people throughout the world on ERP, and we get to get these snippets from CTOs and different people that are in and have teams of hundreds of people. One of them even has more than that. That's building out these solutions that will help us on an everyday basis. So hang in there was what I'd say to the listeners with AI. I think, to your point, Ralph, we're not quite there on seeing the full value, but it's coming. And so that, long story short here, going back to where you were, Ralph, that is one of the benefits of these private cloud and public cloud solutions, is that you're getting all of this development that's, billions and billions of dollars that are being developed today for solutions that we don't see, but it's just the groundwork for what's to come.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing is, as those investments that you're talking about, Sean, really are investing in platforms, right? So that as you look at a solution 5 years from now, you're not going to be able to tell whether you're in an application, a data lake, or in an AI bot, right? I mean, when you talk about the lines blurring, that's why people are making these platform plays of coupling the application layer with the data layer, with the AI layer, and then agentic computing, as you were saying, over the top of it to really create this flywheel effect of being able to take benefit of AI. So it is an exciting time. I think that we just like to make sure that customers have the right level set or understanding of, when they're signing, why can't I, the next day be able to get this really cool chart that the system has made for me based on the 10 years of purchasing data I just gave it. We have to be careful in making sure we temper people's expectations.
So during the conversation, we've covered a bunch of things, right? Why one size doesn't fit all. I think that's clear to our listeners that people don't like to hear it, but it all depends. It depends on where they are, what they have, and where they're going. There's different factors to determine what tier, how complex does their system need to be to support where they want to be and where they want to go in the next 5-10 years. We talked about on-prem and private cloud and public cloud and the benefits and differences of those three options. Sean, as you talk to your clients out there, from small businesses to what we call mid-market, to large enterprise businesses, what tips do you have for those businesses trying to select that right size ERP? Where do they start?
Well, yeah, they should start in two places. The first one is on a vacation. So if it's cold outside, go someplace warm. Maybe you want to go someplace cold, like the mountains, Colorado, right? We love the mountains in the winter. That's the first place, is take a vacation. And then the second place is, depending on whatever your faith is, if you have it, great, like go do your thing, burn a candle, pray, like you're in for a ride, right? And if that's not your thing, that's fine. Just be ready. Just put yourself in a place where you're ready for a rocket ride, because that's what you're going to get into. And it's good. It's just a good thing. And usually the people who are behind the change of an ERP, the individual, like there's one person that's like, oh man, we're going to have to do a new ERP. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I'm looking around and nobody else sees it, and I see it, and like, okay, here we go, right? Oh my gosh, what am I signing up for? The sponsor, the project sponsor. I mean, we all know them, and
Yes.
and the brave soul who's like, okay, and then, but it does start with one usually, and then of course it should go to more people that are at least supporting, looking at solutions. If it's just you, and you're like, yeah, let's do this, it's going to be great, and the rest of the organization, especially the upper tier, the upper echelon of the organization's like, no, I don't know if I'd go through it if I were you, to be totally honest with you,
You're
because
going to be howling into the wind.
you'll
It's
be howling into the wind, and yeah, and like there's a ton of money you're going to be looking for, you're going to be spending a lot of time, and people are like, what are you doing, right? So there has to be some agreement, at least amongst, say, the upper executives, to even get into this. Now you can do some research, get online, call us, call you guys, you should get some information, that's fine, but like at some point you're going to turn around and say, okay, so we're going to change the entire business while we're running, and it's going to be this much money, and I think it's going to be great. So just make sure, please. So seriously, so now that you've done all the vacationing and the whatevering you do, so now you've got to understand what you need. Like you must truly, unequivocally know our manufacturing is broken, right? We make great products, we do wonderful things, but we have no clue what's happening out there with all of our plants. Or consumer products. I'm looking at the back of Sean's screen there, right? Our customers are making us do incredible types of packaging, and we have new brands, we have different variations, we have all this complexity we've had to do to keep up with the market, and it's all in spreadsheets. Maybe it's Google Sheets, so at least you think it's a little bit better because it's backed up, but Google Sheets are scary too, just like Excel. These things happen, and you're right, as the sponsor who's looking at this saying, we got to do something about this, but you've got to just dial in your needs, get those needs well defined, and disseminate those needs across the departments and divisions, and the functional areas are going to be impacted by the software to the leaders, so that the leaders, you can go to them and say, sales, we're having some problems with blah, right? You'd think organizations have handled the CRM dilemma, but some of them haven't. But here's the problems that we're going to try to solve, and I want to make sure you agree with that. Same thing for all the rest of the divisions that are touched. Maybe you're not going to change your HR, payroll, human capital management system. Still make sure HR is in the loop with it, right? Because you're probably going to have people 6 months from now complaining to HR that they're working too hard because you're going through an ERP implementation.
Yeah, that
Seriously.
goes under that organizational change management category, doesn't it, Sean?
That's right. Right. And it also goes under there's another 3-letter acronym called CYA that I also like to think with too.
Yep.
If you're not sure what that is, you can Google it.
Yeah.
So you start communicating and disseminating, spreading this information across the key organizational leaders to say, we got to do this. Like, this is why, this is very simply why we're going to go forward with an ERP project. And if it's not simple, don't do it. If it takes a 300-page PowerPoint and a whole, internal rate of return ROI based on whatever discount methods that you use to convince people to do it, it will fail every single time. What doesn't fail is, oh, Lord, we're a distributor, right? We used to have 10,000 SKUs. Now we got 100 and 100,000 SKUs. We have no idea what our costs are. Tariffs are changing things. We've got to automate this. We got to go through the pain and anguish of doing this. Good. Then you're in, right? Like
You have
it
a
needs to
measurable
be.
outcome then, right? You
That's
need
right.
to be able to measure whatever it is you're going to pursue.
That's right. So once you have that under wraps, now you can start talking to vendors. I would definitely take the time to get your needs set first before you call folks like Navigator. I mean, we help with the needs stuff, but like I even want my clients, honestly, to do a little bit before they even call us, because if they think this is small and they call me and say, "Hey, will you help me?" They'll never hire us. They won't, because they're like, "I got this. It's easy." And I say, I bless you. I wish
God
you the
bless.
best of
Have
luck.
at it. Yeah.
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 Here's my number for later. If you have a problem, please don't call me when you're 2 months from go live and you're like, "Oh my God, the system doesn't do what we thought it should do, blah, blah, blah." Fine. We'll help you out still. But long story short, get the needs defined, talk to some great vendors, think about those tiers that we talked about, think about what Ralph said about deployment options. And you will find a vendor that doesn't just treat you well or sales are nice or anything, but they actually can demonstrate that they can meet your needs as best as possible. Because I'm telling you what, you're still making a leap of faith. I don't care how long you spend in the selection process. It's a lot like a marriage. I'm just saying. It doesn't matter how long you're with somebody before you say, "Okay, we're together. I'm going to know everything about you." No, you're not. You're going to
Until
learn
the first
more.
day.
Right. That's right. Day 100, day 1000, you still learn things, but you'll start to see as you put more time into your selection process, not just the software vendor that meets the feature functionality requirements, technical platform, et cetera, but the implementation partner is just as important, if not more. And in our experience, it's more important to find a partner that really gets what you've done, what you need, your industry, your background. They've already learned, been there, done that. But they're also super interested in your success, and they're willing to do just about anything. I mean, frankly, that's why we were glad to have you guys here with us, because you're that type of organization. I don't usually plug other organizations, to be totally honest with you. That you're not paying me for that. We're on the Zoom together. But the bottom line is that we only bring in implementation partners that really, really care and are betting a lot on your success. Because if you don't matter to your implementation partner, man, I just had a call today with a client that we're going through some problems where the people are getting busy and they're starting to focus on other projects. So I have to make some calls to the owners of the other firm and say, "This is right. What are you doing to my client?" Boop, they'll all show back up and then we'll be fine. It's one of the values that we bring, actually, is because we do so many deals with different software vendors and implementation partners, we can wield a little more power than just an individual client. But the bottom line is, for you that are listening to this, the sponsor out there, please pay attention to your implementation partner. Don't just say, "Yeah, we're going to go through this big selection process for the software, and oh yeah, we'll get a partner. That's fine later. Yeah, it'll be easy." No, it won't. You are betting your job on those people. So keep that in mind. I'm kind of raving here. I better stop, but there you go. And ranting.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, Sean, is really important. Getting the first part of it right is so important, and it's not easy, right? Getting your needs documented, getting it properly communicated throughout the organization is critically important. And frankly, there aren't that many people in business that have that experience or capabilities, and that's where bringing in somebody like you guys, right, can really help the success of the project.
Yeah.
So really important, not just to select the right SI firm, but also to select the right advisory partner, right? Listen to the word advisory. You should have the right advisory partner, take their advice, and then the process will go more smoothly than it would have otherwise.
That is true. I can attest to that one.
Fantastic. What a great conversation and discussion. I think we touched on an awful lot of stuff in our 45 minutes together. Are there any last things that, Ralph, that you want to just wrap things up for our listeners today?
Well, I think we've shared a lot of information, Sean. You're right. I think that as Sean Wendell said, it's important to really look at who you're entering this relationship with, whether it be the advisory firm, the software publisher, or the systems integration firm. I always tell our sales team, people still buy from people, right? It's a people, even though we're selling electrons moving across wires or across memory chips, etc. It all comes down to having that trusted partner to make that leap of faith with. So I think that that's really kind of the key element to getting it right.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that the last thing I would say, Sean, is I feel for people that have to go through these decisions. I have experienced, I mean, we just had something happen recently with somebody who ended up, it was like, wow, like, was it ERP that drove this? Unfortunately, I think it was. Like, you're investing so much of your life into these projects, much less, you get a quarter into a project and it's really hard to stop it. So then it just keeps on going and you're halfway and you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And you're 3/4 of the way and you're like, like you really, just like you said, Ralph, the people side of ERP, we've got organizational change management. We talk a lot about that. But I really tend to more focus on just like these couple key people like we've been talking to here that have to make this decision on behalf of not just today's organization, but where we're going to be 10 years from now, right? You double, triple, quadruple, 10x, whatever the size is. That decision's being made today to for the benefit of the future. So you of course have to do your homework. You have to understand. You got to listen. 48 minutes into a couple guys that have been doing this for like 30 years. Just crazy to think about each. But you really, the decision that you're making. I really respect people that go through this. I really do, because the impact that you're able to make and to do the right thing. It's, for some people, maybe it's once in a career that they really do it. Oh, I do this every 3-4 years. I go to different companies, and I would say, you might not be the right client for us,
Right.
because and probably I think the same for you guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But
we think very much the same way.
yeah, we want people like, no, we want to do this. We want to see this through. We want to get the value out of it. We want to see the long-term approach. Take the long-term approach with these projects, because if you make a short-term decision and it's wrong, it's hard anyway. It's all hard. So if you're in it for the longer term, you can win. You can be successful with ERP still. There's, hundreds of billions of dollars of ERP software and services spent every year for a reason. These organizations need to get out of these on-prem solutions that don't meet their needs, or cybersecurity risks. I mean, we could go on and on and on. We're at the tail end here. But the bottom line is, you can do these projects, you can be successful, but like you said, Ralph, it really comes down to the people still. And I love that about our industry, and I think it always will.
It's what keeps it interesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Sean, Ralph, thank you so much for coming together and having this conversation. For our listeners, biggest takeaway, ask a lot of questions. Reach out to ERP Advisors Group. Reach out to Navigator Business Solutions. Ask those hard questions. If you're not asking hard questions, you're not going to get the right solution. So with that, I want to thank both of you and thank all our listeners for joining us today.
It was a real pleasure.
Yep. Thank you, guys.